From the rolling hills of the east to the vast farmlands of its core, Iowa is truly a state unlike any other. Welcome, fellow traveler, to Iowanderlust, the only podcast dedicated to everything our great state has to offer. I'm your tour guide, Bill Wright, and in this episode, we will be discussing something entirely different from what you were used to listening to in the earlier stages of Iowanderlust. You will get to know all of the essential facts and information about Iowa so you will be prepared for your next big adventure out to the Hawkeye State. This has been something I have been looking forward to since I have memorized plenty of essential information about not just Iowa, but every state in the USA. That includes their geography, history, symbols, and culture that makes them truly unique. So, since this is Iowa, I'm going to take you deep into what makes our state unique in Iowanderlust Episode 6, The Little Known Facts. So, let's not waste any time and jump right into the basics. Iowa, if you might not already know by now, is located within America's heartland, the Midwest region. It is surrounded by 6 other states, those being Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Dakota. And it's the only state in the nation to have its eastern and western borders shaped by rivers. The Mississippi River forms Iowa's eastern border, while its western end is defined by the Missouri River, along with its tributary, the Big Sioux. The fun with rivers does not stop there, however, as Iowa was named after one. The Iowa River, which defines much of east-central Iowa, was named after the Iowa, yes, it's pronounced Iowa, Indian tribe, a word which translated as beautiful homeland. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Iowa Corn Song, a song which promotes Iowa as land where the tall corn grows. And sure enough, Iowa produces more corn than any other state, with it being ranked second only to California in terms of agriculture. It's no surprise that Iowa is often nicknamed land where the tall corn grows, but it is also garnered, get it, Garner, county seat of Hancock County, another more interesting nickname. The Hawkeye State is a reference to Chief Black Hawk, who led the Sac and Fox tribes against European settlers in the Black Hawk War, starting in the early 1830s. This is also the namesake of the Iowa Hawkeyes, the sports teams that represent the University of Iowa, one of the big 3 universities the state has to offer. Their bitter rivalry with the Iowa State Cyclones in football has been one of the defining events in the world of Iowa sports. That's because, no surprises here, Iowa does not have any professional major league sports teams. There are some minor leagues, but college sports are what Iowans live for, regardless of whether they wear the black and gold of Iowa or the cardinal and gold of Iowa State. Speaking of Iowans, there are about 3.1 million of them living in the US of A, making approximately 1% of the national population. Iowa ranks in the middle for both population and area, with a size of just over 56,000 square miles. That land is divided into no fewer than 99 counties. However, there was one point in Iowa's history where its county count was at a very even 100. The greater Des Moines metro has around 800,000 residents, more than any other metro located completely within the state. There is a bit of a larger interstate metro area, with the Iowa city of Council Bluffs sharing the same metro with its much larger western neighbor, Omaha, Nebraska. After the capital, Iowa has 2 other cities with populations exceeding 100,000, those being Cedar Rapids and Davenport, both located east of Des Moines. The largest city located west of Des Moines is Sioux City. Iowa goes by postal abbreviation IA and is well known for its many state symbols. And you'll get to hear a bunch of those state symbols in the next portion of this episode. Stay tuned, fellow traveler, because Iowanderlust is the only podcast dedicated to Iowa travel and is thus dedicated to Iowa symbols as well. Welcome back, fellow traveler. Iowa, much like virtually every other state, has at least a few symbols that add to its uniqueness. The state's seal, motto, flag, flower, bird. All of these are features that are nearly universal across all 50 states. When speaking in terms of Iowa specifically, the seal was adopted shortly after statehood by the First General Assembly and showcases the very best of Iowa agriculture. This comes in the form of a wheat field, sheaf, rake, and sickle on the left side, and on the right is a lead furnace and a heap of pig lead, symbolizing the state's industry. A militiaman stands front and center, bearing an American flag in one hand and a rifle in the other, and is backed with the iconic image of the Mississippi River, complete with the steamer Iowa sailing on its waters. To cap it all off, the seal is topped with the incarnation of an American bald eagle gripping a streamer in its beak. That streamer is inscribed with the state motto of Iowa, "Our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain." In keeping with this motto, Iowa was admitted into the Union as a free state, the 29th in the Union as a matter of fact, on December 28, 1846, close to a year after Texas was admitted as a slave state. That same eagle crest can be found in the center of Iowa's state flag, which took direct inspiration from the national flag of France. Iowa was once part of French territory before being sold to the United States as part of the Louisiana Purchase, which included a vast expanse of territory west of the Mississippi River. And the tricolor design of its flag clearly echoes the state's past. The so-called state banner was designed by Dixie Cornell Gebhardt, a resident of Knoxville and member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, or DAR, as a result of Iowa National Guardsmen lamenting the lack of a flag to distinguish their regiment from those of other states. Thus, the iconic tricolor was born, and even though it heavily resembles an existing flag, Gebhardt intended the colors to stand for courage with the red, purity with the white, and loyalty, truth, and justice with the blue. I personally find Iowa's flag to be relatively distinct, especially in comparison to all those other state banners that just stamp their state seal on a solid colored backdrop and then write their name beneath. I'm looking at you, Illinois. That red, white, blue color combo is yet another nod to Old Glory, the banner which he flies over all others here in the land of the free. However, I do have to give a shout out to Iowa's neighbor to the north. Their new state flag is pretty awesome. Alright, so that's the state flag, one of the better ones that the country has to offer. Now to the state flower and bird, the animate symbols that are also a trend across the other 49. Officially chosen by the state legislature in 1897, the wild rose is an iconic symbol of Iowa's natural features. The GA did not give a specific answer to which rose is the official flower of Iowa. However, the wild prairie rose is the most widely accepted by citizens. The flower is known for its distinctive pink and yellow stamen, and it blooms from June all the way through to the later stages of summer. Not only is it the state flower of Iowa, but it also serves as the state flower of North Dakota. This is despite the fact that its scientific name, Rosa arkansana, literally has the state of Arkansas mentioned in its species. If you want to check out these flowers for yourself, Then I would have to say State Center, the self-proclaimed Rose Capital of Iowa, is the place to go. However, there are several traces of this iconic flower throughout the state's vast expanses and gardens. Another token of natural beauty seen flying during its migration thanks to well-stocked bird feeders is the American goldfinch, which was chosen as Iowa's state bird in 1933 by the General Assembly. The male easily stands out due to his bright yellow plumage with black accents, while females appear to be a slightly duller shade, inclining more towards olive green. The goldfinch is additionally the state bird of New Jersey and Washington, where it is referred to as a willow goldfinch. It is no surprise that Iowa's state tree is the oak, the acorn-producing deciduous tree that is also recognized as the national tree of the U.S. Several species of oak reside in the remaining woodlands that Iowa has, as they are vital for food production, and the oak was adopted by the state legislature in 1961. 6 years later, Iowa became one of the few states to officially recognize a state rock. The geode, which is most commonly found in the southeast corner of Iowa near Keokuk, is distinct among other rocks in that, while it does have a hard outer shell, on the inside is a stunning line of crystals. Two types of geode were officially chosen: the Warsaw type, which features calcite crystals, and the Keokuk type, known for its quartz insides. And now we go to the state song of Iowa, simply entitled The Song of Iowa. It was written by Samuel Hawkins Marshall Byers in 1867 and was officially adopted by the General Assembly to become the state anthem in 1911. It is set to the traditional Christmas carol, O Tannenbaum, known to us English speakers as O Christmas Tree. And Byers' lyrics theme is centered around his love for the great state of Iowa. He wrote it when he was in prison as a Union soldier in the American Civil War. When he first heard the notes of the Confederate anthem, Maryland, My Maryland, which continued to be the state song of Maryland all the way up until 2021, and also set to the tune O Tannenbaum. He then wrote the lyrics and upon his release asked a French opera singer at the Foster Opera House in Des Moines to perform it for the first time. It was well received by the audience, who requested constant encores of it. He also advertised the song to schools and was played after the Star-Spangled Banner in numerous state events. However, the song has fallen out of fashion in recent years, and there have been calls to change the state song of Iowa. Luckily, there is a prime candidate for replacement, and that is the Iowa Corn Song, which refers to the state as Iowa, the same as the Iowa Indian tribe, and highlights Iowa as the land where the tall corn grows. In the lyric, that's where the tall corn grows. Iowa is truly the land where the tall corn grows. And that was a lot to unpack right there for state seals. Hold on to your seat, fellow traveler. We have not even tasted the complete espresso of Iowa's culture. Coming up next, you will get to hear from an Iowan what life is like living in the Hawkeye State, or simply traveling to the Hawkeye State. And I will debunk all of your stereotypes, all that and more, coming up right up on this holiday special version of Iowanderlust. Welcome back, fellow traveler. Iowa is truly a land of surprises, and I have gone to experience a lot of them because I'm an Iowa native. I first lived in Iowa from essentially my birth. I was born in eastern Iowa, raised in central Iowa, and have explored almost every single area of the state, including their 3 major college campus towns. So I know what Iowa life is like. I know Iowa nice. I know this is Iowa. I know travel Iowa. I know all things about the Hawkeye State that a lot of people from outside the state do not know about. and you'll get a lot of this information coming up. So there's actually this one video on YouTube called The Don'ts of Visiting Iowa, which I highly recommend you check out. And it's published by this channel called Wolter's World. And he also went into a lot of details that I covered on earlier in Iowanderlust, like the Amana colonies and Pella and the Grotto of the Redemption. So if you want to experience more about what Iowa's like, go check this dude out. He is really into Iowa culture. And I am into Iowa culture too, so let's break down a lot of the stereotypes that people outside the state have about Iowa. Number one, a lot of people from outside the state think that it's just another expanse of corn like all the other Midwest states. That's kind of true, but keep in mind that Iowa has a bunch of vibrant communities like Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, the 3 college campus towns I mentioned earlier, the Quad Cities, Dubuque. Iowa has it all. And there are really vibrant communities that offer a ton of attractions that I have already gone into earlier in Iowanderlust. So a lot of the people here are very nice as well. So don't call Iowans undereducated, because they have one of the highest literacy rates in the nation, one of the highest graduation rates in the nation, and also one of the lowest crime rates in the country as well. So Iowans really know what it's like to be educated, especially from high school. College level, not so much, but on the high school level, it has one of the highest graduation rates. And a lot of Iowans take pride in their state, regardless of whether they wear Iowa or Iowa State gear, but they all respect the state that they that they call home. So you don't be surprised to see a bunch of Iowans wearing their Iowa shirts and Iowa State shirts and all of that kind of stuff, because they take pride in what Iowa is. They are proudly waving the state flag across every single business. They are proudly seen displaying shirts with the state map of Iowa. They are commonly seen wearing wild roses, especially in weddings. And they are really nice people to communicate with. I remember when I was in high school that it was really easy to make a lot of friends in high school, because Iowa schools are really not that large in terms of enrollment. So it's very easy to make a lot of nice friends here in the Hawkeye State. My next major gripe. This is also centered around Des Moines. Don't call it Des Moines, the silent S's. I've already heard a bunch of Illinoisans and Arkansans calling their states Illinois and Arkansas, which they should be Illinois and Arkansas. Residents of Des Moines take this to the next level by having 2 silent S's, one at the end of each word. So don't call Des Moines or Des Moines or any one of those other names. Also, Des Moines is a very vibrant community. I've already talked about it in the first episode of Iowanderlust, Des Moines is the best, which we covered the State Fair, Adventureland, and a bunch of other cool stuff in the capital area. My next major thing that you should never avoid when going to Iowa is getting some of their grub. I especially love Casey's Breakfast Pizza, which you can go to every time you fill up your gas tank at a Casey's in the morning, and there are some slices of breakfast pizza available in the Casey's general store area. It's essentially a pizza with cheese sauce in place of tomato sauce, and it has toppings that include bacon and sausage and scrambled eggs. It's a really good delicacy to try out in the state of Iowa. But that's not the only one. We also have Maid-Rites, which are essentially a version of Sloppy Joe's. It's a loose meat sandwich with onions mixed in it, essentially a loose version of a hamburger. Do not put ketchup on it, because it will just make it even messier. I think a few of them already have tomato sauce in the mixture of the Maid-Rite sandwich. And finally, for Iowa cuisine, this is especially common when you go to Pella. It's the Dutch letters. It's an almond cream filled pastry that is in the shape of a letter S. And it's especially common in the Pella area. In fact, Pella is probably the most Dutch community in the United States. One of the most Dutch communities in the world, as a matter of fact, outside outside the Netherlands. Yes, we know the Netherlands is the most Dutch place on earth because they're Dutch. But outside the Netherlands, I think Pella has the cake for the best Dutch community in the state of Iowa. The Umatilla Colonies might be the most German city in America, the most German settlement in America outside of Germany. And you have to check out their woodcrafting skills and get their handmade merchandise and stuff like that. A lot of Iowa is vast open farmland, and it's very easy to miss when you're going along I-80 and I-35, but you really start to take it in when going down to one of Iowa's many gravel roads, which is one of my major gripes with Iowa, is many people like to go to the left side or the right side of the gravel road and treat it like it's a normal paved road. Don't do that. Drive down the center of the gravel road, and that will reduce the impact that you get with other vehicles, especially farm vehicles. Farm vehicles are notorious for taking up the vast majority of gravel roads in Iowa. So, they're very slow. So they even have a special marker on the back of them that's kind of like this bright red triangle. When you see that, you need to slow down because if you don't, then you might crash into the tractor, which is not a good deal at all. And while we're on the topic of vast open farmlands, this means that Iowa is one of the most tornado-prone areas of the state. So don't be surprised when you hear the civil defense sirens and the emergency alert system going off in your area of the state when there's a tornado approaching. This is especially common in the western area of the state, which is part of the larger Tornado Alley. And a lot of the people in western Iowa would agree that the tornadoes are probably the worst thing to affect their state in the severe weather season. I've heard several more tornadoes happening. There's one in Greenfield that happened recently that destroyed much of the community. So don't be surprised to see another tornado hitting Iowa in the near future. All right, next up we have the bridges of Madison County, which do not tell the bridges of Madison County were taken straight out of the movie. They are truly historic landmarks and are not to be confused with the motion picture. I've actually experienced the bridges in my junior year of high school, where the bridges were in Winterset and surrounding communities in Madison County. I've also checked out the Hogback Bridge, which is pretty neat. But don't also drive down the center of the bridges because they're historic landmarks. They should not be driven through. That's just a few of the many stereotypes that people outside of Iowa have in association with our state, which I can tell you are 100% wrong. I'm here to bust you with some more trivia information coming up right here on Iowanderlust. Throughout the course of Iowanderlust, I have taken you on a tour across the great state, exploring all of the various tourist attractions this state has to offer. But now, I would like to take you on a trip back in time, exploring the colorful history of Iowa for the past 2 centuries. It started in the late 1600s, when European explorers Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet first marked the spot of modern-day Iowa, which was previously a frontier land that was dominated by the indigenous peoples, in particular the Iowa, but also the Sioux, Meskwaki, Fox, Potawatomi, Oto, and Sac, among others. Iowa's first permanent European settlement was created in 1785 by Julian Dubuque, who arrived in the area during that time, 9 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed, but before the Louisiana Purchase came into effect. The modern-day city of Dubuque was named in his honor. Then, in 1804, Lewis and Clark made their expedition out to Iowa and named Council Bluffs in honor of their meeting with the indigenous tribes. Then, 4 years later, Fort Madison became the first fort built in Iowa and now is a thriving community, the county seat of Lee County in the southwest corner of the state. 30 years later, the territory of Iowa was created, not surprisingly, on the 4th of July, and it not only included all of Iowa, but also parts of Minnesota and the Dakotas. The first territorial governor was Robert Lucas, and the first capital was Burlington. The capital was moved to Iowa City in 1841, and then in 1846, Ansel Briggs of Andrew was nominated as the first governor of the state and was inaugurated in the old capital in modern-day Iowa City. Then, in December, President James K. Polk signed the documents making Iowa a state of the Union. The date was December 28th. And the modern-day county of Polk County, home of the state capital, Des Moines, was named in his honor. 3 years later, the first marriage license was held in Madison County. It was issued to David S. Smith and Jane Kaysen on April 17th. The wife was just 15 years old when she got married, and Justice of the Peace Seth Adamson was the officiant at the ceremony. Also in 1849, Lucas County paved the first public highway in the state in September. The first county courthouse was built in Lucas County and was erected at the cost of just $374. Think about it. My iPhone even costs more than that. The building was 18 feet by 22 feet and 1.5 stories high. $374. Modern day tech that could fit into your pocket costs more than that. Then in 1854, the Iowa State Fair was born. It was famously held in Fairfield, with 16 counties participating. 1 year later, 800 acres in central Iowa were purchased by the community of True Inspiration, and the first village of what is now the Amana Colonies was laid out. Suffragette Amelia Jenks Bloomer arrived, not surprisingly, in Bloomers in the Council Bluffs area, also in 1855. Then the first bridge across the Mississippi River was built in Davenport in 1856, and the University of Iowa was established 1 year later to celebrate 10 years of Iowa as a state, with the old Capitol being the oldest dedicated building, and the first permanent one on campus. Iowa adopted its present constitution 1 year later in 1857, and the capital was moved from Iowa City to the current capital, Des Moines. The first post office in Iowa was chartered to Hampton, the county seat of Franklin County, in December of 1857. Then in 1864, Ames was established to serve the Cedar Rapids and Missouri River Railroad. But 5 years later, it served another key purpose when the Iowa Agricultural College and Model Farm was enacted under the Morrill Act as a land-grant college in 1869. 77 men and 16 women made up the first graduating class, and later on, Iowa Agricultural and Mechanical College was renamed to Iowa State University, although I really think it should be called Iowa A&M. The gas company in Cedar Rapids boasted 300 customers, 115 street lamps, and 7 miles of gas mains in 1871. Just think about it. Gas was a big deal back in the day before electricity was invented. The original delicious apple was propagated in Madison County in Iowa, where the covered bridges are. Its first train robbery occurred when Frank and Jesse James robbed a Rock Island train near Adair and took $3,000. Jesse James is actually the point of inspiration for the villains Jesse and James of Team Rocket in the Pokemon anime. In 1880, farmers in Iowa switched from wheat to corn production, thus creating the Iowa Corn Song and promoting Iowa as the land where the tall corn grows. And corn is still a major cash crop in Iowa to today. Its first fire department was organized in Carroll. It boasted 20 active members and was called the Fire Rescue Company. It had no firefighting equipment beyond the ordinary bucket, but it served as a visual representation of the firefighting company nonetheless. They will be celebrating their semi-quincentennial next year, as a matter of fact. Then, local markets priced in Sac City were butter for 12 cents a pound, eggs for 8 cents a dozen, potatoes for 25 cents per bushel, flour for $3 per counterweight, wheat at 60 cents per bushel, oats at 15 cents per bushel, and corn at 19 cents per bushel. You could get it for a whole lot more at modern grocery stores now. Then, in 1881, 1 year later, Barnum and Bailey's Circus came to town in Cedar Rapids in June, displaying the first electric lights ever seen in Iowa. Again, for a community that had a major gas industry not too long ago. A disastrous fire struck in Grinnell in June of 1889. It destroyed every building in its path, including most of downtown. A total of 41 structures were burned, displacing 54 businesses. Then the Hart Park Company in 1907 advertised department creating a new word for the American dictionary, tractor. The Charles City Company was the founder of the tractor industry, and modern-day Iowa still is a giant among agricultural businesses, with John Deere producing its tractors in Waterloo. The Maytag washer was invented in Newton by Howard Snyder and introduced in the market by Fred L. Maytag, the namesake of the company, which went bankrupt in 2011. But Newton has since opened the Iowa Speedway, so there's another point for visiting Newton. Local people built a dredge and began the first lake dredging program in Iowa at Medium Lake in Palo Alto County in 1909. The Iowa Department of Transportation was created in 1916, although in that point it was called the Iowa Highway Commission. The USS Iowa was sunk during target practice. It was originally launched in 1896, but it sunk in 1923. And Iowa resisted testing of the dairy cattle by state veterinarians, which started the Cow War and resulted in the calling out of the Iowa National Guard. The first municipal swimming pool was constructed in Cedar Rapids. It was a new concept in recreational facilities. In fact, many cities across the state have their own municipal pools. The one in Glidden is terrific. The one in Carroll has massive speed slides. But a lot of cities in Iowa have municipal pools, and that formed a new form of recreation across the state. Pope John Paul visited St. Patrick's Catholic Church north of Winterset during his visit to America in 1979. And then Ames was designated as an All-American City in 1983. But it was in 1959 that the most tragic accident in Iowa occurred when the day the music died happened on February 3rd, when Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper gave their final bows at the Surf Ballroom before taking off on their next adventure. Little did they know, it wasn't meant to be. Finally, our final point of note was in 2017 when Iowa chose its first female governor, Kim Reynolds, who still serves as the state's chief executive to this day. And Iowa continues to remain a state that has been valued in its history and will always serve tourists for years and years to come. So, on that note, I would like to thank you all for tuning in to this holiday season of Iowanderlust. And as this episode comes to a close, I would like to finish off the series by saying a quote from the famous movie Field of Dreams. Is this heaven? No, but it is certainly the best state in the Union to visit when you get the chance. This is Iowa.